Hello, contractors, and welcome to Toolbox for the Trades. My name is Jackie Aubel, and today I am chatting with Christina Dear, the Director of Operations at ZoomDrain and the owner of 2 ZoomDrain franchises in Florida. We spoke about adjusting your communication style, the benefits of owning a franchise, and how Christina manages her busy entrepreneur lifestyle. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Christina Dear, you are the Director of Operations at ZoomDrain, and you are the owner of 2 ZoomDrain franchises in South and Southwest Florida. Today, you and I are going to be talking about why young entrepreneurs should consider the franchise blueprint for growth and profitability. I'm so excited to chat with you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
I am so excited to chat with you because, quite frankly, you are one impressive person, and I know I'm going to get a ton of insight from you. We are going to kick this off, though, with an icebreaker, and I ask a bunch of different icebreakers always to start this show, but I thought for you a good one would be, what's the best piece of advice you ever got?
No one likes excuses. That's kind of one of the best piece of advice that I got early on in my career. Nobody likes excuses, and as a leader, it is always your fault. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, but like early on in my career, just as a leader, when you don't understand that, your leadership style is so different. And it's really easy to get frustrated with your team members until you start to really look at yourself and you're like, okay, well, what didn't I do? Or, was I not clear enough? Did I not set the expectation? And so it really always starts at the top. And sometimes that's a really hard lesson to learn, especially for young leaders and entrepreneurs that haven't been doing this a while. But I think once you learn that, like you really cross over to the other side of like you have to take responsibility because ultimately it is yours. There's a book like Extreme Leadership, and that's really what it talks about, right? It's just taking ownership and taking responsibility.
I really appreciate that. And that's definitely something I struggled with at the beginning of my career for sure. I think it also sets a really good model for the folks that report up to you whenever you come across some sort of misstep or issue and the first thing you do is reflect on how you could have done better. I think that sets the tone for good leadership throughout an organization. Well, you've got a really interesting story. So let's kick this off. How did you get into the trades?
I was quite literally born into the trade. So ZoomDrain started 30 years ago. So we quite literally grew up together, which is awesome. But yeah, born into it.
For those who aren't familiar with Zoom, your father is one of the founders of ZoomDrain.
Yes. So my dad started ZoomDrain back in 1995. It was him, his 2 brothers, and his dad. Just started as a really small family business out of my grandfather's basement. And within the last 30 years, we have grown into a multi-million-dollar franchise organization throughout the United States.
Yes. And one of your most infamous employees who works with me now at ServiceTitan and who recommended you heavily to come on this show is the dear Ellen Rohr. So you probably knew Ellen even when you were a kid, right? What was that like?
Yeah. So obviously I've known Ellen for a long time. Before she became a founder at ZoomDrain Franchise, we were just a small family business, and she actually consulted with my dad. Her and Al Levy consulted and really helped take our disorganized family business into a business that was ready to be franchised just over 10 years ago. And so, yeah, I've known her for quite some time. She's watched me grow up. I'm very lucky to call her a friend and a mentor.
Awesome. Yeah, right back at you. She is one of my favorite people for sure. Can you tell me a little bit about what prompted the decision to turn ZoomDrain into a franchise after 20 years of being a single shop?
What Jim and Al and Ellen really found was just how scalable and repeatable this model is. And once you have the blueprint, right? So like that's really what franchising is about. And when they worked with Jim, all those years ago, what Al imposed was like manuals, right? So like obviously, I'm sure so many people in the trades are so familiar with Al Levy, and he really helped document, train, and put manuals in every part of our business. And so once you have that, then you really lay the groundwork for something that's so repeatable. And it's just a great business model, right? So, I mean, drains, like, they're not going anywhere. So we always say, like, there's two things that people are always going to do. They're always going to eat and they're always going to poop. So the drain industry is not going anywhere. It's not sexy. It's a great business model.
It's not sexy, but it sure is profitable. And just to make sure that I've had other Zoom Drain folks on this show before, including Ellen and a couple other folks that have been a part of your atmosphere. My understanding of Zoom Drain is that the model is it's a hyper specific type of service. It focuses completely on drains. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Got it. And is it on the residential and commercial side or just residential?
Both residential, commercial.
Okay, awesome. So you grew up with this business. Zoom Drain almost was like a younger sibling that you grew up with, right? And I know that your father wanted you and your brother to have careers before deciding whether or not you wanted to join the family business. He wasn't like, you must join me here at Zoom Drain. He was very, let's, go find your own path. And I
Yeah.
want to hear how your 8 years of retail experience prepped you for your work at Zoom.
At a very basic level, it was a great customer service experience. I think more importantly, though, I became a leader when I was 18, or, I got promoted into a management position when I was 18, and I had zero business being in a leadership role at 18 years old. But I learned a ton of leadership skills that were so important that I wouldn't have been in the same place if I would have just started at Zoom Drain when I was 18 versus learning some of the leadership lessons that I had to learn. I think quickly I really learned how to manage the business, right? The operational side of working in a retail business. That wasn't the challenge. It's leading your people. I had to learn some pretty tough people lessons, my first few years that really helped me prepare for any type of career, especially in a family trade business.
So really managing people, not just the customers, but your team members was, you kind of just got thrown into the deep end there by having that leadership position at a pretty young age.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I've come to realize throughout my career is you manage your business, but you lead your team. And that is a very different mindset. Is you can manage your operations, your KPIs, and it's very data driven, but leading your team is about your people. It's about how you show up. It's about that extreme leadership. Having the understanding and empathy, which I am not a naturally empathetic person. It can be a learned skill, but I am not naturally empathetic. But really understanding that shift is people aren't something that are just to be managed. They are to be led.
I think that's a really great takeaway. And I'm happy that you said, I'm someone who empathy comes to me second nature. I was always, 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 always. It was like whenever I did assessments, it was always like my top skill. And I was like, this is really frustrating because I would love to learn how to manage numbers and manage spreadsheets, but it's just not where my brain goes. But it is true. I think that, I wonder if there are, and maybe you see this in your role as director of operations at Zoom Drain. I wonder if you see a lot of leaders come in when they sign up to be franchisees that they are trying to manage their people instead of leading them. Is that something you see a lot?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that people piece is just so important. It's how you build your culture. It's how you grow thriving businesses. It's how you create buy-in and even having the emotional intelligence sometimes, right? I tend to look at things just very data driven and just with not a lot of human element. that sounds tough, but I just I see something, I know it needs to be done. And then the expectation is you just do it. There shouldn't be a debate on whether you like to do it or not. It's just you just do it. People aren't always that way. And as a leader, you have to continuously change your communication style to fit your team. I'm very direct, and I've learned along the years that how other people communicate, I can come off as very cold unless I change my communication and understand how they communicate, what information they need from me, instead of just being very direct and like, let's move forward. So,
I think this is really, really good because what you just told me about you have the self-awareness of your native communication style and that you can come off as cold. When did you receive that feedback? And how did you first feel when you got it? And how did you pick yourself up and be like, okay, this is something to work on? Like, how did you take the taking that personally out of it? Because I can imagine it must have been like, what do you mean I'm cold? That's how
yeah.
I would interpret it. So I would love to hear your answer to that.
I do remember it. I actually remember it very clearly. I was working at Gap at the time, and my manager, who is still one of like my best friends today, she was an absolute great mentor. She was the general manager at the store at the time, and I had another manager that worked alongside of me, and our communication styles were so incredibly different. And she was like very empathetic, very over communicative, and she felt like my directness was cold. I mean, like, and those were the words that she had used. And my manager actually did this exercise with us. She put a timer on and she asked us each to describe something. And we had a minute. I did the exercise in 20 seconds. The other person went well over the minute, right? So, like, she took up the minute and then some. And the exercise was we each learned the same information in the time that we took. Our delivery was just so different. Using that exercise, it really put in perspective for both of us is like, she's not cold and you're not like over communicative. It's just, we learned the same information. It's just your delivery. And so you guys have to understand that when you communicate with each other, how can we find kind of that middle ground of, maybe you need to explain something for more than 20 seconds, but then maybe you don't need to take up, over
5
a
minutes.
minute, right, to kind of communicate the same thing.
Yeah. No, because on the other side of it, I appreciate directness in certain contexts, especially when you're running a business, you got a lot of things moving. Give me the
Yeah.
message right away. Get rid of all the qualifiers. But then on the other side, if somebody's giving too much context, too much qualifiers, it's kind of like, all right, get to the point. Like my
Yeah.
favorite phrase
Yeah.
is they go around the block to get next door.
Yes. Exactly. Like, I'll just
Yeah.
jump over a fence. I'm gonna find the quickest route there, and that's just who I am. But it's really helped to learn other people's styles. We do a lot of personality testing, or, we've done all of those, all of those things. And just understanding where each of you are coming from. The biggest thing that I learned is that, like, it is not your employee's responsibility to meet you where you communicate. It is your responsibility to meet them where they communicate.
Mm. Going back to the if, as a leader, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that, and I love the exercise example that you gave. I think that's actually a really nice, simple way that people can implement trying to communicate to 2 different people, like, this is why your communication maybe isn't meshing the way that you think. I mean, that could also be worked for not only in business, but in relationships too. One more question on the communication piece, because we are gonna talk a little bit about the manuals and all of the processes that Al and Ellen helped put into foundation of Zoom, right? Is there a manual for empathy? Is there a manual for communication? How does that work?
No, there should be though. Maybe I don't think I'd be the right person to write it. But it is built into our manuals. I started as a call taker, right? So like I had to learn empathy. I remember picking up the phone and saying, like, somebody said like my basement is flooding, and I literally said, "That's great." I said that to them on the phone. I was like, "That's great. We can help you." And, and my manager at the time was like, "Christina, you literally told somebody that's great." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I could see how that's not great. I could see how I probably should not have said that." Right. So, I mean, there is very clearly in the manual, it says like, be empathetic. And I was like, I don't know what that means. But yeah.
That is an incredible example. But like I can put
Yeah.
myself in your shoes or as a new call taker, right? You pick up the
Mhm.
phone, you're being trained to look out for opportunities. Someone calls and says, "My basement is flooded." You're like, "That's great, an opportunity for me to
Yeah.
book." But to them, they're like, "You
Li-
effing kidding me? I'm about to spend probably thousands of dollars to repair my basement." That is
Yeah.
a hilarious example.
And well, I mean, I came from retail. So like everything was great. Like that looks great. It's great. You're here. Like everything was great. And then you transition into this home service where these people are at the like most stressful point in their day. And then me, like a 23-year-old, it's like, that's great. We can help you.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But that speaks also to how you kind of made your way up in Zoom. So after
Yeah.
you had worked in retail for quite a few years, you decided that the retail industry wasn't as stable as you would have liked it to be.
Yeah.
And you saw that your dad and his business partners had built something really incredible.
Yeah.
So when you joined Zoom Drain, you started from the bottom and worked your way up. And I want to hear about how this trajectory helps you in your current role as director of operations and also owning two of the franchises yourself.
So yeah, I started as a call taker, but it really helped me understand how the business operates. And so I've done almost every single job. I've taken thousands of phone calls. I've dispatched hundreds of technicians. I've even cleared a couple of drains. And it gave me some real understanding of what the business is like, what our customers are like, and really, the basis of our business is the customer and the technician. And everything that we do has to be in service of those two people. And doing ride alongs and getting to meet our customers, getting some real windshield time with our technician. That's like one thing I've just never lost sight of. In every position that I've had, I've always gone back to like, what is the true point? And it's the customer and the tech.
Yeah, because they are both your customers in different ways. Obviously, your customer is your customer. They need a service that you could provide, so you provide it to them. But your technician is also your customer in that they are giving you their time and their talent in exchange for compensation. So within your role as director of operations, so you worked at the bottom, made your way
Yeah.
up, you hit every position at Zoom Drain, and this was at Zoom Drain HQ or the original Zoom
Dream
Drain,
Philadelphia.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So within your role now as director of operations, you help onboard new franchisees. So would love for you to walk me through what a typical onboarding looks like for them.
Sure. It's a 16-week process, typically from the kind of time that they sign on to the time that they open. There's a series of in-person and virtual trainings. We use a lot of ServiceTitan training, obviously, because it's our operating software. So I teach them all of the basics on how to operate their business. We go through our manuals, and then they come here and do in-person training for just like the practical application of everything. We do a lot of business development and marketing training. It's a huge part of our business and getting them calls, right? We really want to try to not rely on digital as much as we can and really set the stage for business development, a lot of boots on the ground marketing. So they learn the fundamentals of those things.
That's really cool. I think that must feel so rewarding in your role to have someone come in week 1 and then see how much they've learned and they've progressed in week 16.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, a lot of our franchisees that we currently have, they didn't come from the industry. A lot of them are, either looking to leave corporate America or maybe they have a sales position and they're looking to build a business and a legacy for themselves, for their children a lot of times. And they don't have business ownership experience. And so you really a lot of times find yourself not just teaching the like basics of what it is that we do. You are really sharing best practices on things, we've learned along the way of just business ownership, of leadership. You have to make a lot of tough decisions, right? As business owners, there's a lot of qualities that are going to tell you whether somebody's ready for that or not.
Oh, tell me about them.
We talk about, what our core values are. We use the acronym GROW. So grit, responsibility, optimism, and willingness. Those are our 4 core attributes that we look for. In business, you have to be gritty, right? So you're going to run into a problem, and it's really how do you get over that? Like when your back's against the wall sometimes, right? What do you do with that? Responsibility, right? Extreme leadership. You have to own it. It's always your fault. Although you're a franchisee, it is your business at the end of the day. We can't make decisions for you. You are the leader. Optimism, right? Like you got to be optimistic. You have to there are going to be tough days in any business, but how you get over that and how you kind of look to the other side, and then willingness, right? Like you got to be willing. I always say, like, I'm not going to ever ask somebody to do something I'm not willing to do myself. I know every part of the business. I can't be BS'd by anybody, and you have to be willing to dig in and to learn.
I love that. I love that acronym. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, what do these new franchisees tend to struggle the most with, and how do you try to help them?
It's really just day-to-day management, right? Like you go from having a, potentially 9 to 5 kind of corporate job, right? Like where you want to hire somebody and you call HR and then magically like you got candidates the next day, right? Or like, hey, you need marketing done, like there's a department for that. And so really for them to understand like you are the department. Like you're the department for everything right now, right? When you're starting out, you have to be, really the person that manages everything. And how do you get everything done in a 24-hour day, right? We all have the same 24 hours. Something that Ellen always taught me really early on was like, we have one life and everything has to be on your calendar, like personal, professional, like we only have so much time in the day. And so really helping them like, how do you manage your calendar? How do you get the most out of your time? And then even your people, right? So like, what are the things that you're going to be able to do? What do you have to pass off to somebody else? And really kind of understanding and talking with them through that very early on.
Yeah, I would imagine you probably have a lot of folks that if they well, you mentioned already, we have some folks that are coming not from the industry that are coming wanna leave
Mhm.
corporate America, which I think is
Yep.
really exciting.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you also have folks that have their own business that are gonna change it to a Zoom Drain franchise. And for that second group, I would imagine you have a lot of technicians that are used to doing the actual work, and so moving from doing the work to actually working on the business is probably a bit of a and I mean the same thing in corporate too. If you worked in corporate sales, for example, or corporate marketing, and now you're opening a Zoom Drain business, it's like, oh, I guess I'm the head of all the departments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly
So
right.
it's just like
Yeah, and
figuring it out.
yeah, no, exactly. And figuring out really like what your strengths are, and if you can't do a certain function, then hiring somebody to do that function, right? And then what's the cost implication of doing that, and and so on. But really just trying to manage their days and like understanding like, hey, most of you guys have families, and you're going to want to pick your kid up from school maybe one day, and that's great, but like you got to put it on your calendar because then you got to do the other things you have to do in the time that you're not doing that, right? So like it's really helping manage their kind of like overall life and understanding you got to live by your calendar from now on.
You are just filled with sound bites here, Christina. I just want you to know you are like a soundbite machine. So, what I think is really interesting about your story, so you started in Zoom and you were born in the business technically, had your own retail career for a bit, and then you decided to come to Zoom, became this director of operations where now you help franchisees onboard into the Zoom Drain lifestyle. And now you had opportunities to acquire 2 of the franchisees in Florida yourself. So now you were the director of operations for yourself.
Yes. Sure am.
So,
Yeah.
I wanna hear about what was that journey like going from director of operations of franchise support to becoming the owner operator yourself? Like,
Yeah.
how was that different, and what was the most surprising thing to you?
I think obviously like I have all the fundamentals down, right? Like I know Zoom Drain and I know how to do every position. So like from a tactical operations standpoint, like you kind of think to yourself, it's not really that big of a lift, right? Like this should be easy. It's gonna be easy. I already know how to do everything, right? The biggest like challenge, I guess, was really looking at it at a small business perspective. And so Philadelphia is a well-oiled operational machine, right? Like the processes are in place, the culture has been built, and coming in and tweaking that, right, or being a part of that is so greatly different than building the culture and starting with a 1 to 2 truck operation. What I think it gave me is it certainly gave me a different understanding of what our franchisees go through on a day-to-day basis at that 1 to 2 truck level. And so you know what's going on, right? Because you talk to them, but then also like kind of living it myself has given me a much different perspective of what they're going through, the challenges that they face. And then, as I continue to train and onboard new franchisees, like I can come from my own experience, strength, and hope, which I think is a really powerful thing to be able to give and not just, hey, this is all the things that you should do and have no understanding of what it takes to have to do that.
Yeah, that was while you were talking, I was thinking that I was like, wow, this probably gives you so much more perspective than when
Yeah.
prior to you having the franchises yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. It gives you a different perspective every Thursday when you have to run payroll in your small business, right? Those are just things like when you're thinking about all the stressful things like insurances and payroll and month's rent, like all of those things are so different on like a small startup than it is at a well-oiled machine. It's a different feeling. And until you have the responsibility of other people's livelihood, you'll never understand until you have that. So,
Yeah. So when did you acquire those businesses?
one of them 2 years ago, and one of them just over a year.
So you
And
did it once and you were like, let's go again.
yeah, sure did. I was like, why not? No, they're neighboring territories, so it really made perfect sense for me to kind of add on. So made sense.
T- Dude, that's really incredible. So you're obviously a very busy person, right? You've got two brands or two businesses that you own in Florida. You are director of operations at Zoom Drain, which is a full-time job. You also have a family. You have two kids and a husband that I assume you like to see every once in a while. So I would love to hear how you have managed to be able to meet all of your responsibilities in a way that is working for you, because I know a lot of owner entrepreneurs, they feel this stress, they feel this struggle.
Yeah. I couldn't do any of this if I didn't have such a supportive husband at home. So he is primarily a stay-at-home dad. I wouldn't be able to travel as much as I do. Obviously, my franchise locations, I live in Philadelphia at our corporate headquarters here. I have to travel to Florida. I have to go to trade shows and site visits and grand openings. And so my travel schedule can certainly be pretty hectic. And if I didn't have a really supportive partner, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. I could call him today and say like, "Hey, I have to go to LA tonight." And he'd be like, "Okay, when are you coming back?" That is the level of supportive he is, which is huge. And then number 2, I would say like 6 months, maybe almost a year ago at this point, like I was at the height of my like, this is stressful, right? Like I have so much going on. And, I think that especially as moms, not that dads don't feel this, but especially as like working moms, like you have just this inherent guilt when you're not with your kids. And I felt like I was failing at like always one or the other, right? So like when I was at work, because I had to stay late or I had to go in to the office on the weekend, like I felt like I was failing because I wasn't with my kids. And then vice versa, when I was with my kids, all I was thinking about is like all the stuff that I'm not doing for my business or even for my job. And so I made the investment to get like a virtual assistant. That's been huge for me to really just have somebody that's like the front line of defense. And like, so when I am home, right, like I do have a team in place. I have a sales manager that runs my operations now in Florida. I have a VA who really helps run my schedule and can work with my teams in Florida, but she can schedule my meetings and she goes through my emails and like she does a lot of my marketing for my businesses. And so like that has been absolutely huge. I found virtual assistants to be incredibly helpful, especially when you're trying to juggle a lot.
Yeah, thank you for being honest about that. That is like one of my favorite things to talk about because in the almost 250 episodes of this show, sometimes I'll be talking with a owner operator and I'll be like, "How the heck are you doing any of this?" Like this I am not that I'm exhausted by the conversation, but I am like picturing myself in your situation. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how do you handle it?" So I love it when folks like you who are these really high achievers, these really impressive folks in the industry are getting real about the concessions and the adjustments they've made to their life to make it work. And shout out to your husband. I think his name is Austin, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Shout
awesome.
out to Austin. I always love it when folks shout out their significant others who
Yeah,
help them support and building these businesses. So that's great.
yeah.
We have been chatting for quite a bit, and you have given me so many good sound bites, so many good pieces of advice. But I want to just focus on one more thing before we head out.
Yeah,
One of the benefits I've been hearing throughout this conversation is how the Zoom Drain franchise kind of has this blueprint that is just designed for success. Like you follow the manuals, you implement all the great stuff that your family created, you can have a successful business. Yes, it's still yours, you're responsible for it, but you have like basically a template to go with. And so I want to hear from you about why you think there's so many people coming in who want to be entrepreneurs coming from maybe corporate, these younger generations, like
yeah.
why they are choosing to go the franchise route.
I think that it gives you the opportunity to be independent without having to come up with the blueprint and your idea. I was saying this to, my dad. I don't think I would have wanted to start my own business from scratch. I wouldn't know where to start. I wouldn't know what idea I wanted to do. Like ultimately it is yours, right? So whether you are successful with it or not does rise and fall with you, but it just gives you a good, here's the template, here's the services, here's our operating system, and it gives you a really good head start. But I would also say the absolute best part about franchising is the network. It's not me. I'm not what makes the franchise. I mean, yeah, I'm a good benefit, but I'm not what makes our franchise system great. It isn't our manuals that make it so great. It is the people and the knowledge that you get to tap into. So imagine starting a business and getting immediate access to somebody that's been doing it for 30 years or somebody that's been doing it for 5 years, or having team members that you can call and ask questions to and peers. Business ownership can be a really lonely place. When you're doing it by yourself, a lot of times your spouse doesn't even understand, right? How do you go home at the end of the day and like talk to them about the employee that you had to fire or the truck that just got into a wreck, or like maybe you had a really good sales day and like you broke your record? They just don't get it. And so to have, to have a network of people that are going through it the same time, and be able to call you when really great things happen and then being able to have a sounding board when things aren't going great, that is the absolute best part about franchising. They say you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself.
I think that's great. I've had only a few other folks that are parts of franchises on the show before, but that is always something that they quote as one of the biggest benefits. And I really like the idea of, you know, you don't have to start from scratch. You could still want to be an entrepreneur, but you don't necessarily know what kind of business you want to have, right? And it's been so cool on the ServiceTitan side of things, watching in the 8 years I've been here, like watching people from outside of the industry come into it because they're recognizing what an excellent opportunity it is. So I think you are definitely a poster child for what is capable within the trades, within drains specifically.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that you took time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to sit down with me today and share your story and your knowledge with our audience. Is there anything, Christina, that we should have talked about that we didn't get a chance to?
I don't think so. We covered a lot. Thank you so much, for having me. I think it's been great, and I hope that it was helpful for everybody, even if they're remotely going through what I've going through or just starting a business, I hope to have left them with a little bit of good advice and just some things to think about.
Yeah, I think you definitely have. Thank you so much for being on Toolbox for the Trades.
Thanks, Jackie.